All right, can you hear me?
Hi, Sriram.
Uh, Yeah, can you hear me? Is the audio clear?
Yep. Yes.
All right,
Yeah.
just a second. So in the last session, I think we didn't have a session yesterday, and in the
Mm-hmm.
last session we completed Dell LAN and implement security for virtual networks.
Mm-hmm.
Let me start sharing the screen. So we completed all this, right? We
Mm-hmm.
completed the
Yep.
point to site, Azure encryption. Then we even talked about express route
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, private endpoints as well. I think we are left with Azure App Service and Azure Functions, and
Mm-hmm.
then App Service Environment. That will complete the second module, and the third module is about, okay, it's the public access. Okay. Okay. All right, so specifically, private endpoints are basically the endpoints that only the company internally uses. So if you
Mm-hmm.
have any other endpoints, we can use that. And then link services are basically establishment of connections between two or three resources or, from our virtual
Mm-hmm.
machine to another instances as such. And I think the last time I couldn't show you the Azure Bastion, Bas. So let me just try and do that. So this is basically a secure way of connecting to our resource while
Mm-hmm.
you're not essentially uh, exposing the RDP instance on the public.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So we'll just have a random password. We have this. Now, either we could have an endpoint port, but I don't think we'll be using this.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'll show you how to connect to this virtual machine instance using Azure Bastion. This is why we are especially doing this, because exposing the public RDP port might end up in an instance where we are
Mm-hmm.
basically our admin credentials are brute forced, and at the end of the day, we might get our developer instance hacked or something. So
Mm-hmm.
this way, either we can have a sort of VPN connection, or the easiest way would be doing with Azure Bastion. Now, this is going to
Mm-hmm.
take a bit before the resource gets spun up. So till then,
Okay.
I'll just cover the other ones.
Okay.
Again, Azure App Service is basically you running your Node.js applications
Mm-hmm.
through
Mm-hmm.
Azure as container services kind of thing. And then you actually obviously have your virtual network inbuilt.
Okay.
So the internet can access this, and then if you want some internal stuff, you can access through the thing. Now, this is how the calculation, like you would be asked calculations. I'll probably make sure to give you a cheat sheet. So
Uh-huh.
basically, what all apps and how many IP addresses you would need.
Oh,
That's
okay.
what,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So if it's for Windows containerized applications, you need four IP addresses
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and one IP address per app service instance.
Okay.
So basically, that's how you calculate the IP addresses. Now, if you need
Uh-huh.
10 instances as such, then you
Okay.
obviously need 50 IP addresses
50.
per app service plan.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the usual calculation, and obviously we have to remember a subset
Okay.
that is /26. 26. Mostly it's just our basic concepts we learned in the OSI framework. And
Mm-hmm.
then the other things is just we're expanding on that. So
Oh.
specifically, suppose this one where it's SMTP. Now SMTP port 25 is obviously discouraged. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because essentially it's a non-encrypted SMTP port. So essentially you
Okay.
could have brute force or you could have sniff and then your SMTP might get compromised. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll be using the other ports such as 465,
Okay.
uh, 465
So it's
port.
for the mail transfer protocol, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Simple. So they use for like POP3 and kind of
Yeah,
things
POP3,
instead. Okay.
yeah, POP3 is for your mail syncing. POP3 and
Ah,
IMAP are for your mails, so incoming mails. And
yep.
SMTP is
Mm-hmm.
solely for sending.
Sending. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So even they have the encrypted ports, so that's the reason. Usually you
Mm-hmm.
had access to all the ports, but nowadays it's discouraged to open the ports.
Okay.
Specifically
Uh-huh.
when we have a lot of easier options where we can just enable encryption by default, so it's not really required to go through the route and expose our
Mm-hmm.
non-encrypted ports.
Understood. Mm-hmm.
And then we have our routing settings, basically how things are configured. And to be honest, it's easily like you can just request certificates. Azure manages everything on its own.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's not like we have to do a lot of you have a lot of configurations or something we have to do. You just essentially give your access to your GitHub repository and then it manages everything on its own. Now you can see this is basically an instance where you might be needing some uh, URLs to get your Python modules
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
from. So that's the reason we are allowing this. And
Okay.
if you are specifically using Linux continuous deployment, you need to allow this as well so that we could get a continuous. So whenever uh, you push a change to a GitHub
Mm-hmm.
repository, it pulls a new image and then it goes on to it builds up and keeps the service active. So usually this is configured. Like the configurations are much. We'll go through that as well because even securing CI/CD pipelines is a really important thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I found another repository that I would have you try this later on after we are done with the AC100 and
Okay.
stuff. So it's basically where we are deploying a intentionally vulnerable structure onto the Azure,
Uh-huh.
and then we are
Uh-huh.
exploiting it.
Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So you can practice your cloud pen testing and red teaming, and we can even have our dedications and mitigation learn up challenges where you
Mm-hmm.
do learn how to detect those and mitigate those. And obviously our command, and you have a lot of instances. I think they did share. Yeah, here we go. There's the structure. There's the whole, what do we
Mm-hmm.
say, structure of that Azure Code repository. This is something
Mm-hmm.
I would have you try this
Okay.
so that we do have our red teaming experiences covered as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not just limited to Azure. They do have AWS code where
AWS.
again,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
the vulnerable instance of AWS, and we even have our Google Cloud as well. So this way, you'll be structured on both
Okay.
the red teaming aspect and the cloud security aspect or the blue teaming aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Now, usually the virtual network doesn't exactly cost anything as of now, but in future, if they do change it, we have to make available on that thing. And okay, now we are here. So this is our instance, our virtual machine instance. Now it has
Mm-hmm.
really less resources, but now if we hit connect, usually it'll ask you to go through a native RDP, but I voluntarily didn't give it that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what can I always do is I can just click connect via Bastion, and then it'll ask for the username and password, and then you hit
Mm-hmm.
connect.
Okay.
And it
Mm-hmm.
basically establishes a link. And okay, I think there's a pop-up lock that is weird. And this is how essentially you connect to the resource or the virtualization instance without explicitly enabling all the remote access ports.
Okay.
You
Mhm.
can control the everything via this, or we could have a more dedicated approach where you have a separate virtual network instance,
Uh-huh.
and then you get access to that networking instance. This is the demo network we created. So we could
Oh.
either do it like we'd get a VPN connection into this, and then we could get into the virtual machine. But again, usually this is the most easiest way because all you do is basically log into your Azure portal, then
Mhm.
get the access, and it directly opens up into a new port. Now, this is the slow because of the instances we used. It's not really preferred for Windows. I just
Mhm.
made it for a demo purposes. That's the
Okay,
reason it's this slow. But yeah, essentially this is how things work.
mhm.
Now, when we created our Windows group, everything is segregated into the demo group or
Mhm.
the instance name. So again, if this was our developer, we'll just give access to this one in the identity and control, identity and access
Mhm.
management, and then they'll access or they'll only access this one where they can connect their bastion services, how they want to connect, and the IP and even the network security group. So if they want any firewalls to be opened or they want to change something, they can in their
Okay.
little isolated resource group. That doesn't
Mhm.
affect our global and regional thing. Now again, by default, when you create a web application, be it a WordPress app or something, it
Mhm.
actually shows up like this. And so it uses Azure's own domain name. Now, essentially,
Okay.
we don't want that. So what
Mhm.
can we do is once we configure this one, and we do have how to publish it. So either we can have our code sync up, or you
Mhm.
can have like a Docker container or Docker image where you're basically pushing it to a Docker registry and then it's building on top of it.
Okay.
So instead of a raw code directly deploying, you can have a
Mhm.
container setup.
Okay. Understand. Mhm.
Database has its dependencies locked. I mean, even those dependencies are locked, but it's usually preferred to have a more isolated approach if you're having a lot of internal services and stuff.
Mhm.
So that's the reason. And then they have the runtime stack, and depending on the operating system you need. So usually when you're deploying ASP applications, you obviously need it to be on Windows. You cannot essentially deploy it on Linux that easily. It's a hassle process. So
Mhm.
essentially all our ASP sites and .NET sites run on Windows. That's the reason your configuration this. And then it'll ask you the stock unit or the size. So how
So.
many
Mhm.
it's basically a unit of measurement. SKUs are basically a stock unit or the measurement of how many resources we're going to use in that particular
Mhm.
instance.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, again, they just basically show you depending on the different pricing tiers. Now, we do have lockdowns where basically we can lock our budget under a certain limit, then it
Mhm.
stops. But we always have the option to check the pricing in before in advance itself, and then keep it depending. And you have
Mhm.
options to select between these three. One is developing and testing instance, and the other is production workload. And then we have our isolated. So if you want to test some new features or you want that to keep it isolated, maybe you have some internal application that you want to
Mhm.
keep it
Mhm.
isolated and you don't want that to mix up with the rest of the network. We have
Okay. Mhm.
we have seen in the previous class, we have seen an example of where it had a complex structure where only few of them were accessible for the internal
Yep.
members and everything was
Mhm.
locked
Mhm.
behind firewalls.
Yep.
So for
Mhm.
that type of instances, you go with isolated.
Okay.
And again, scaling is basically if there's a lot of network or a lot of thing, you can basically ask it to increase the computing resources for that limited period of time and then come back to the normal configuration. Uh, did I get disconnected?
No.
Okay. So basically scaling, we have automatic scaling and a lot of our cloud platforms. That's the another advantage. So that way it scales and descales. Now Azure has a different way to deal with it. So
Okay.
that's a bit complicated, but usually you wouldn't be running into that because we wouldn't be essentially configuring the scaling aspect. That
Mm-hmm.
is usually under the developers region. So that's where they configure and handle.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously we have our logs. How the logs log if there's any suspension or you upgrade it to a newer tier.
Mm-hmm.
There's another thing. Everything is right here, and this is how you manage the logs. There's right here in the dashboard, and I think I can show you the logs of demo group. And now these are in the preview section,
Mm-hmm.
and I can create a rule. Now for this one, okay, now this one, itchy. Okay. No, it's depending on how many you want to see. So right now I'm keeping it on the memory available sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay. Mm-hmm.
you can see how much memory it's being consumed or average memory that's been going on. Right now we are not remoting into it. I just closed it, so it's running in the background. So that's the reason it's
Mm-hmm.
not showing up anything. Other than that, it'll just remain dormant until you try to use it, and after that it'll go back to sitting idle all the
Okay.
time. And then you obviously have your upgrade preferences. So if you want to upgrade it or not, you want it to have upgraded early. So basically platform, if you have any runtime update or something, then you
Mm-hmm.
can make sure that your platform is obviously getting the latest upgraded. Then you obviously can delete. And then they have this CLI exercise where you can basically had a you can basically create a new app service or create a group, then manage. Again, this is whole you'll be provided in a cheat sheet, so
Mm-hmm.
that's nothing to worry about. Same, I think same goes for AWS as well. They have their own CLI instances, so I'll be
Okay.
grabbing those cheat sheets as well
Mm-hmm.
and giving you a proper notebook kind of thing where it has
Oh.
cloud security in detail,
Oh.
so that it's not confusing in the later on when you're
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
even when you're actually in on hands, you can always refer to that cheat sheets.
Okay.
And these are some normal profiles. So how you can like that's a scenario based approach where
Mm-hmm.
how you can configure and implement network security for suppose an Azure SQL managed instance. It's not that much. Essentially, you're just gonna give the normal policies and that's it. So you will cover this in the hands-on itself. So it's
Okay.
not that much of a hassle to learn it up. So it's basically like you'll be spinning up a resource. Now, essentially, I didn't do anything for the demo group. All I basically did what I went on to the marketplace, I clicked
Uh-huh.
allow, and then it asked me by default, these are the ports it will be active. That is
Oh.
3389.
Uh-huh.
Because it's a Windows instance and we are not
Mm-hmm.
hosting it anything. It's not a server instance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, I decided not to allow it access. Now it's
Okay.
not allowing. That's it. When you're spinning up a certain server, then you will know as well. So maybe, for example, we can go here, spin up a web app, probably. Okay, that's right. Now we have options to choose which plan we're going to use. This is another app service basically, and we could just give it, and it usually generates the subdomain on itself because a lot of people did use. our like the demo name probably. Now it's gonna ask you for the admin username, and then you can just create a random password, and then now it's gonna validate everything. So if there's
Mhm.
anything. Now I directly jumped onto the final aspect. I'll actually show you what can be configured in the deployment.
Okay.
Now this is high availability is basically you can have it like multiple servers, and if there's any zone level failure, they'll automatically manage it.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And here we go. This is the main aspect. So we do need managed identity on this aspect. So if it's coming about managing credentials and providing safe access.
Uh-huh.
So usually you don't enable WordPress as an internal app, but let's assume this is an internal app
Okay.
and we only want our company employees to have access. Now we did
Uh-huh.
have this one, and this one is basically, I don't think anyone is going to randomly come and look up this one. Specifically was the huge domain name. I don't think no one's monitoring. So you can host an app service application like this. And then you have CDN. Usually you don't enable CDN that easily. Why? Specifically, it's an internal app, right? You just need one
Uh-huh.
instance.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if it's my
What
website, I
exactly CDN is?
it's basically a
Um,
content delivery network. So basically, suppose I have my website right
uh-huh.
now. This is my personal website.
Okay.
So when I try to access this, all these images and stuff, now being it on a central server does help me, but not that much
Mhm. Mhm.
because
Mhm.
I might have a lot of members accessing me. So what happens is when I usually have content delivery networks on, not the entire website per se, but you see these icons, right? All of these
Uh-huh.
icons and all that, the photos are the main public content, the ones we put in the
Uh-huh.
public folder. Wait, this
Yep.
icon,
Mhm.
wait, this icon. All of these are thrown on a CDN, which has multiple servers or multiple server, like they're basically uploaded onto multiple servers all across the group.
Uh-huh.
So if you
Okay.
open it from Japan, maybe the
Mhm.
closest server will be Korea instead of India. So
Okay.
the images
Mhm.
will be loaded by that.
Okay. I understand. Okay. Mhm.
Now, usually when you're doing it, like if you're self-hosting your website, you have to
Mhm.
manage all this. But when we are throwing it on Azure or any other cloud network, or even be it something like Versailles, this is another cloud platform, not exactly a cloud platform. This is mostly catered towards developers, just for
Mhm.
deploying specific applications. Again, this runs on AWS, the background.
Mhm.
They just make it much easier for developers to configure stuff. Nothing else other than that. So it makes it easy because Azure has a lot of servers all across the
Uh-huh.
group. So they can manage this one. So if I
Okay.
throw it on a CDN,
Mhm. Mhm.
maybe I have some kind of video or some kind of photo. All of those are
Mhm.
loaded very fastly when
Okay,
it's
I
on a
understand.
CDN.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. I got it.
Essentially, the same goes for YouTube and all of this other
Mhm. Understand.
multi
Okay.
thing where
Because
3D
I
is stored.
haven't came through that CDN thing, so it was a new thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So usually you go through the CDNs and stuff when you're mostly into development.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Right now we have our sizes. We are also using a basic utility. So we are not going for premium and stuff because again, we are basically on a trial account. We are just testing out. And then we are going with a smaller size. It
Mhm.
has like 2 GB of RAM instance, and then that is the available credit units, I guess, if I remember correct. Yeah, Azure Compute Unit. On how much it's gonna take up the charge. So it has like 100 compute units, and then we'll hit create. Then it basically creates another resource group having all of the services of WordPress, and then it
Uh-huh.
deploys it. Right now it's still under deployment. Yeah, here we go. Now I'll slowly have our resources created. It usually takes a lot of time. First, it created a managed identity to access, and the store, the password that I've given it. And then it'll obviously create the virtual network. Then it'll create few subnet resources. Then it'll create a SQL database. Then it will deploy the WordPress, because WordPress essentially needs a database to function.
Mhm, mhm.
So here you can see. First, it created a private link so that that MySQL database is not publicly exposed.
Okay.
Only WordPress container itself has access to it, and the members in that resource group. Other than that,
Mhm.
no one has access to it. I'll try it. There we go. Right now, it's a two, that is virtual network and virtual managed identity. It first created the links, then it'll create the
Mhm.
database server. Here we go. There's another private DNS zone that's been created. These are all the operation IDs, operation names. This is if you're working with some APIs or you're working on internal apps, you might need
Mhm.
to know how these
Okay.
IDs are working or something. But
Mhm.
most of the time, we are not making this complex of an internal app. It's usually being handled by the CLI automation. So that
Oh, hello.
all right.
Hello.
Yeah,
Hello.
hello. Yeah,
Am I audible now?
yeah.
Hello.
I was
Okay.
disconnected. There was some issue with
Oh,
my
okay.
network.
Okay.
Yeah. Were you saying something?
No, no, no.
So basically, it's being deployed. This is our
Mhm.
database instance. Again, this is not that much of a useful, but except our resource name and the resource ID.
Okay.
There's a
Mhm.
there's a unique subscription, and then we have our resource group name,
Mhm.
then providers, specifically which instance we are using. We are using Microsoft MySQL, and then the
Mhm.
WordPress. Now it's going to take a bit before it gets deployed. The same goes for any employee. So basically, usually before you could easily deploy it directly onto the main thing. Before
Okay.
resource group
Mhm.
was not mandatory.
Mhm.
Right
Mhm.
now, however, it has become mandatory. Or most of the marketplace resources you create are essentially thrown in their own resource group just to have a
Mhm.
better security measures. And now we could see. So if we go here, this is another Ubuntu server instance. Now
Mhm.
if I hit create, now usually either you can create a new resource group or I could just throw it into the demo
Hello.
group.
Yeah, just a minute. Yep.
And then usually you would prefer to have an SSH authentication instead of a
Uh,
password, because password
mhm.
is vulnerable to brute force. But I don't have an SSH key generator at this point, so you
Okay.
might as well just use a random password, and then we'll go on to settings. And basically, if you have a domain name, you'll enter it here if you need, and then the disk type depending on which kind of the SSD disk you want to use, and then the subnet. Usually, we create a demo group, so it'll configure everything from that or get everything from that. Then you can have your boot diagnostics so that if you are constantly restarting your system, or you
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
fear you might have infected it with something that's basically, or if you want to know what all agents are running, because we do run a lot of kernel level agents sometimes when the
Okay.
developer
Mm-hmm.
instances or the
Mm-hmm.
service itself. So if you want to know if everything is working fine, or if you want to know if in future the instance might be affected, or you wanna have every log, then you usually hit enable. Then you can basically add extensions. So something like Azure AD login,
Mm-hmm.
basically the SSH login, and then Rapid7, if you know, that's the makers of Metasploit framework.
Uh-huh.
So basically, they do have their inside agent on the, then we have pipelines. So again,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
continuous iteration and development. And if you have any custom scripts, and then this is for Linux server monitoring. And then we have our Azure automation. These are
Mm-hmm.
basically something you can add as an extension to the Linux instance itself. And we have key vaults as well, where we store all of our private keys and
Okay. Mm-hmm.
certificates if you have any. I think it's almost done. Yeah, it's still going on. They always have this security benchmark demo, so you can always
Mm-hmm.
compare it with your existing instance.
Compliance kind of.
Yeah, compliance situation. And we have this average, or this is how you need to follow as an
Mm-hmm.
example
Mm-hmm.
guidelines. So that
Mm-hmm.
way we can ensure if it's working everything. Now, the principle is the data in transit should be protected out of band
Mm-hmm.
or traffic capture. So we are using encryption for that, obviously. And then we have network boundaries. So it's we are not accessing everything or anything, and only required things are being accessed out of the in the public network, and they are thoroughly encrypted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as I say, this is optional. Like encryption is optional on the private networks, but this is critical when it's on external or public networks. That's it. And then they have this secure transfer. So you might have a Linux instance which is serving your application, and then you have an Azure storage or Azure blob storage where the data of the public or the application is being stored. Now, the server is publicly accessible, but you need this Azure storage instance to be secured, and not
Mm-hmm.
everyone can access that. Only the Azure application from within our network can access this.
Good. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And obviously, the data in transit is enabled, encryption in transit, rest encryption at rest encryption is enabled, and then we have HTTP enabled by default most of the time. It wouldn't even
Mm-hmm.
allow you to create an instance without without HTTP. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
without HTTPS, if I remember correct. And here we go. This is the default domain that Azure is being Azure has hosted our specific WordPress instance,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's still being installed essentially. But for the normal, you can see this is our app service plan that's
Okay.
located in the central US. Usually, uh, most of the resources are spun up and app service stuff up spun up in central US.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you have
Mm-hmm.
control. I just didn't think of much. Now they are still installing. That's the reason it's a bit delayed.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, it's pinned up three things. First is our app service, where our actual application is hosted. This is the plan so that it makes sure everything is in right order. Then we
Uh-huh.
have a private link to the database. This is the database. Then we have managed identity for the app service to access this. And this link is stored in this one. And then we have a virtual net that basically throws everything together.
Mm-hmm.
In the essence, it might seem it's a lot of thing we are doing, but most of it is managed by Azure. So it's very rare that we have a manual intervention and we are trying to configure everything from the ground up ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have obviously Azure Virtual Network Manager, which basically manages different types of networks. And you can, even if it's split under different subscriptions, you can group them. And so in the essence, basically it's a management service which allows you to group, configure, and deploy. So if you want to allow a specific port across all networks, you can use
Mm-hmm.
Azure Virtual Network Manager to basically do that. And you can even
Okay.
segment your virtual network. So one virtual network
Uh-huh.
might be split into two, or
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
essentially you might add another network. That's how you can easily manage. So this
Okay.
is only for virtual networks and it can manage across different subscriptions. So
Mm-hmm.
as in the example, they do have three different subscriptions, two
Yep.
different groups.
Mm-hmm.
Even then it's managed, you can easily manage. But again, I think for this you need to have your network manager role. Only then you can
Mm-hmm.
do this. And you can deploy this using obviously our Azure portal or CLI or Azure
Okay.
PowerShell. That in this Cloud Shell, this is usually called Azure PowerShell or Terraform. Terraform is basically a custom instance that's
Uh-huh.
by HashiCorp. So it's nothing. It's just basically how you run a Docker container using a Docker Compose file.
Uh-huh.
Imagine
Uh-huh.
you do that with cloud as well. So you write
Okay.
everything, you write the infrastructure as code, you have a code
Uh-huh.
file. Then when you hit deploy or when you run the command, it
Uh-huh.
basically sits between your code and the cloud network or cloud
Uh-huh.
platform, and it
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
orchestrates everything. So if you want three
Understood.
servers or
Okay.
two servers,
Oh.
and
Mm-hmm.
these are the requirements, you write it down, you hit Terraform, and it'll basically manage everything on the cloud front end.
Uh-huh.
It can be used with AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft
Uh-huh.
Azure, and a lot of other cloud networks.
Okay. Okay.
Here we have the files that we need and how you want to configure, and then
Mm-hmm.
Terraform manages everything accordingly. I on AWS, on Azure. This is Oracle. I think this is another
Okay.
cloud
Okay.
platform. VMware.
Instead of using the PowerShell directly, we can use
Yeah,
this
exactly.
and
Terraform.
okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And Terraform
The
is
other
not
way.
just
Okay.
limited to Azure, right? Whereas Azure
Yep.
PowerShell or Azure
Mm-hmm.
CLI is just basically there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Understood. Okay.
Now, basically, it's installing on the WordPress. So it's spun up the resources. Now it's starting to install everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is under Cloud Shell. Now, if I want to switch, I can always switch it to PowerShell. Just by the color, we can easily recognize which is being used.
Is the commands for the PowerShell common for throughout the platform, or it's like just for the Azure these commands would work, or is it different from the AWS? Or
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's different from the AWS.
so it's better to use Terraforms as
Yeah.
being common to every other platforms as well. So okay.
Yeah. So it's usually Terraform is vendor neutral. Again, vendor neutral basically means
Mm-hmm,
where
mm-hmm.
you're
Yeah,
not
I
being
understand that.
dependent on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But the problem is you might have certain policies in the company that's restricting from you to use Terraform or something
Uh-huh.
else. In that
Okay.
cases, usually it's better to use Azure CLI. And Azure CLI
Uh-huh.
is not just limited to spinning up resources. While
Mm-hmm,
as
mm-hmm.
Terraform is only good at like it can only create resources, but in Azure CLI, you can manage your resource groups, you can
Manage.
delete users,
Okay.
you can add users, and all this. That's the reason you need to learn every cloud platform's CLI a bit. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to be like
Okay.
perfect in it, but you
Okay.
need to be able to understand to get through the exams.
Okay. Understood.
And then we have the pricings and basically the limits of what Azure Virtual Manager can do. And yeah, this is how it's going to be charged.
Mm-hmm.
So it's being charged per hour, and here we go. We get the bill of this. And if we are using something like network-based billing, and depending on the per network managed, it's gonna charge. So the billing is sort of confusing nonetheless, because they have subscription level billings, and they have network based billings, and they
Mhm.
have resource group based billings as well. And they even have a service level agreement depending on how much uptime you need and how you're going to manage.
Mhm.
Then we have our security group. I, did I explain this or was I?
Yep, you did.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's basically they're just showing it again. Yeah, I've gone through this.
Mhm.
So yeah, essentially we are done with this one, planning and implementing. So all that's left, I think, is secure compute after this. After the
Mhm.
networking, uh, go back. We are done with identity and access. We
Mhm.
completed our secure networking. Now I think we have this one where it is essentially we are secure compute storage and even operations.
Okay.
Actually, let me just check again because they did delete some. So they basically delisted few things. I'm not entirely sure. Okay, fair. So we have gone through this. We have completed these two. And then we are going to go with secure compute storage and databases tomorrow.
Okay.
It's going to take us 2 days on average. And then I'll complete
Mhm.
this one as well using Microsoft Defender for Cloud and Microsoft Sentinel. These two are
Okay.
basically, Sentinel is more of your machine learning sort of where it's blocking threats
Mhm.
continuously. And Defender for Cloud is the normal threat detection that is being offered by
Uh-huh.
Azure.
Okay. Okay.
After we're done with this, we'll
Mhm.
probably have an hands-on and we'll go through the Azure labs on the class itself.
Okay.
These are something Microsoft has given us. So you can just try it on this account, which I'm currently having, the free trial one.
Okay.
So I think I still have a bit of credits to experiment with, and we do have time. So I'll
Mhm.
probably get done with all of these labs in that
Mhm.
period of time. So
Okay.
except the one or two things we couldn't be doing is basically enabling just-in-time access because
Mhm.
the P1 is not being activated for some reason. So other than that, we'll be completing all of these. So you do
Okay.
have hands-on experience, and then later on you could have I'll try to build up some projects which you could
Okay.
basically build on the cloud environment, and
Uh-huh.
then
Uh-huh.
maybe taking screenshots or making a report because you can't have
Okay.
that lab running all the time.
Uh-huh. Yep. Understood. Mhm.
So that will be our project on easy security, and then we'll even go forward with SC100.
Okay. Mhm.
About the blueprint, is everything okay with the blueprint?
Yep. I've gone through it. It's perfect. Yep. That should guide me through the course. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's mostly it for today's class. And if
Okay.
you have any other doubts, you can ask now.
No, I'm fine. So with probably will be finishing this course. That's 500 by like maybe
This
mid of
weekend.
next week, this weekend. Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
By
All
this
the
weekend,
labs and everything.
yeah. I think we'll probably have
Okay.
the labs on Friday. If not, I could
Friday.
actually take up a class on Saturday and we can finish the labs as well. If
Okay.
if you want to complete it in this weekend, next week you solely want to start SC100.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay, then we'll do that way. So, with the for the practice
Yeah.
questions, you said you'll be framing up and I will be coming up with that. So when would that be take place? No, because I could finish this first. and move on to the next one. So instead, jumping up with the courses, I wish to like, clear everything with this course first,
Okay, so
and just
basically you
more. Okay.
wanna complete the Easy 500
Take up a
first.
yeah,
Yeah.
so take up a practice test or something so I could evaluate myself, so if I'm clear with all the aspects of this course, and then we all move on to the SE
Yeah,
100.
sure, that's fine as well.
Oh,
So if we are gonna have a
it's
class,
just up with me,
yeah,
so if you find any other person coming up with us, it's fine, we can have it later on, but if it's just me, it's my thinking is I could take up the test first and move on to the next course.
yeah,
It's
I'll
my
do that.
thinking. It's up to
Yeah, it's
you.
fine.
So okay.
It's fine. Like, I'm currently teaching separately itself because I don't think I can club both of you
Mm-hmm.
because she's still an identity and access management. So we are already
Okay.
almost halfway through our course. So it's better
Uh-huh.
to keep it separate
Uh-huh.
and I'll finish up your stuff. And then
Okay.
probably let's do this way. If we are going to go with test as well, maybe let's
Uh-huh.
focus on
Yes.
completing it easy find it this week, and then
Okay.
we'll leave Saturday and Sunday for revision. And in the
Uh-huh.
Monday, we could have your theoretical test or the
Okay.
practice test
Uh-huh.
kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
And then in
Uh-huh.
the Tuesday, you can have your practical session. So we'll be covering theory
Okay.
and then practical. And then,
Understood.
depending on the evaluation, we'll move on.
Understood.
Yeah,
Or maybe we can take up like Tuesday and Wednesday because I could, I need some time. So like
yeah, sure,
for
that's
the
fine as well.
revision thing. So I
Yeah,
could
it's
take
fine.
up the Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, and we could have a test on like on Tuesday, and we will move on.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, okay. And what's up with the other tutors? Will they be joining us this week or maybe probably next week, or what's the
Probably
plan with
next
the
week.
others?
I have to ask
Okay.
Akash. I've been
Uh-huh.
kind of busy with my stuff as well from the last weekend. That's the
Uh-huh.
reason I couldn't
Uh-huh.
take up the class yesterday as well. So I
Okay.
have to confirm it with Akash and the other tutors as well.
Okay. Okay. So
So
that will be
essentially,
not like one-to-one thing. I guess so.
uh, it depends. Depending on if you
Depends.
are expanding on the same knowledge of Azure, then we have to keep it
Mhm.
separate. If not, if
Okay.
he's teaching another approach in the red teaming aspect, then I think we can combine.
Okay. Understood. Mhm.
Because I think Deepansar is mostly focused on his red teaming approach more than cloud approach or anything
Mhm.
else.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
we could cover that approaches first as well.
Okay. Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Fine, Sridhar.
Right. Thank you for joining.
Yep. Thanks. Cheers.
Cheers.